Good afternoon, Kansas City. That's the best y'all have?
Inspector Beaufort, we will go forth with 10 questions that come from the police commissioners and the community. And after that, then we will go forth with the community questions. There will be 3 questions from the audience, and those will be picked by Bishop Tolbert. So we'll go ahead and get right into it.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So first question. What should communities most affected by high violent crime expect if you are given this job?
So first and foremost, good afternoon, everybody, once again. When you talk about communities that are affected by violent crime, what you can expect from me is first and foremost accountability. I don't think any police department in America that does not have a chief that is going to be accountable for the crime that is going on is going to be successful. But in addition to that, you also have to have a community relationship. No chief is going to be successful without it. You're going to lose because it's the community first and foremost that knows what's going on in the places that they live. So you have to be accountable first and foremost, but you have to also have that relationship that's going to have that trust. And when I speak about accountability, it's not just from my aspect as the chief, but it's also the commanders that are working for me. I think it's very important for the commanders that are working for me and alongside me to have that accountability as well. The commanders that are out in the divisions that are servicing you, you should know who they are. If you don't know who they are by now, that's a problem. And those are some of the things that I will be bringing to the table, is that level of accountability, but also a focus on intelligence-led policing. When it comes to the crime that's going on, specifically as it relates to the gun violence. It's something I'm very used to. Being from Philadelphia, we are plagued with gun violence. We have 482 homicides this year alone, so far. So gun violence is something that is just plaguing us. And it's countrywide, it's nationwide, and it's something that we all have to deal with, but it's something that the community has to work alongside the police department. But the police department as well has to have an open ear to listen to what the community has to say.
Excellent. Thank you. As Chief of Police in Kansas City, how would you boost morale in the department while maintaining positive community engagement?
So when you talk about boosting morale within the agency, that's important. Specifically as it relates to policing today. I don't think there's been any time in recent memory where policing has been placed on a precipice as it has been specifically as it relates to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. Even in Philadelphia, we had a situation, Walter Wallace. And these last 2 years, on top of dealing with a pandemic, has been very stressful for police officers. One of the things police officers are going through is a form of PTSD. Whether we want to admit it or not, the job is not easy. We are doing things that go far beyond just normal policing. And we have to, as an agency, understand that, but also be there for our officers to get them the help that they need. But we also have to commend our officers for the outstanding work that they do. I don't think we do that enough. In police agencies all across the country, we allow the media to tell our story, and we don't do a very good job telling our own story about the great things that our officers are doing. And when I look at the men and women of the KCPD, they're doing outstanding things. You know, it's not that they're bad police officers or this agency is a horrible agency. It's just an agency that, in addition to the 18,000 other police departments across the country, are battling tough situations. So I think ensuring that officers know that they're cared about, that we are here for them, that I am a leader, that I want to hear what you have to say. You're not just going to be treated as a cog in a wheel. I think nobody wants to be treated that way. You want to understand that, or you want to be made to feel as though you have a voice in your agency, but also the community aspect of it as well. I think our officers have to understand and empathize with the people that they are serving. When you take a step back and you look at it, and you say, you know what, I'm servicing a community that needs help from time to time. But when they don't need help, am I stopping to say hi? But we also have to give our officers the opportunity to be able to do that. We don't because of the 911 call system. Our officers don't have time to actually engage. Those things are important, but I think working hand in hand with the community, I think we can get to a level of where we need to be.
Excellent, thank you. How will you improve the fight against property crimes?
So when you talk about property crime, it's you don't hear that too often anymore. And that's because of the gun violence that's going on. Most departments now are really focusing on gun violence. And some of those crimes have gone by the wayside in terms of our attention. We really haven't been focusing as we need to be. I think that relates first and foremost to informing homeowners some of the things that they all need to do, that we can work together with, ensuring that they're knowledgeable about what's going on around them. So if you don't communicate as an agency with those people that you're servicing, if you don't let them know some of the things that are going on within their area, putting out those notices and communicating with some of those community leaders so that they can get the word out, you're going to have that increase in crime. But there's also an accountability level that extends beyond the police department. And what I mean by that is there has to be some prosecution when it goes along with making arrests for offenders who are committing these types of crimes. I think far too often a lot of the district attorneys nationwide consider it not as hard of a crime. But one of the worst things, and it's some people may think this is crazy, one of the worst things is to have your home burglarized. You feel violated.
Yes.
Somebody can steal your car, take your flower pot, but somebody comes into your home and burglarizes your home, that's a problem.
Yes.
And you feel like something has been taken from you, and I heard the alarm, I'm sorry. But those are the things that there has to be an accountability from every aspect. Education, arrest, and prosecution that sticks. So those are the things that need to be done.
Thank you, thank you. Next question. How do you plan to deal with the mental health crisis, specifically the 988 calls regarding children?
So specifically as it deals to the mental health crisis, it's a real one. As it relates to children specifically, but also even extending beyond that. And I think COVID has really brought about that to the forefront of everybody's mind. When it comes to dealing with that, you have to have officers that are crisis trained, CIT trained officers that are going to intervene. You want to make sure that all of your officers are actually incorporated into that process as well. But you also need to have other agencies along with the police department. I cannot stress to you, we cannot just rely on the police department to conquer an issue that goes beyond what their servicing capabilities are. Meeting young people at their needs is very important, but it goes beyond policing. We have to have behavioral experts engaging in the process, working alongside us within the agency. When officers are out at specific locations and they identify areas of need for these young people, we need to be able to rely on the person that we make the call to and say, hey, listen, I was out at this location. This does not look right. When I make this call, I need to know that you're going to go out there. Not a month later, not 2 months later, the next day, if not that day. So everyone has to be held to that same standard of meeting those needs. The mental health issue is real, and it's something that we're affected by in policing, but also in the community as well. And I think that if we understand that, if we work together in partnership with that, with those behavioral experts, we'll be able to combat some of the challenges that these officers are seeing as they go out conducting their day-to-day duties.
Great, thank you. So what steps will you put in place to make sure that our police force is free from racism and sexism? So one of the things that we have to understand is whether something is perceived or it is real. If it's just a perception, that means it's real. So let's understand what's going on within this agency. So you have a active Department of Justice investigation going on. Now, there hasn't been any declarations yet, but remember when I said if it's perceived, that means it's a problem. So if you have something like that that's going on within the agency, it doesn't mean that the agency is bad, but some of its practices may need to be changed.
that's where the accountability aspect comes into it as the leader. So as the leader, you have to be able to recognize and say, you know what, we got a problem, and we have to fix it. And if you are not willing to do that, these are the issues that you're going to have. You have great men and women that are in this police agency, but the officers are going to take up the persona of the leader. So if I have a leader that does not care, then I'm going to have officers that don't care. So understanding that, you have to have methods in place that are going to be, in accordance with procedural justice, but also diversity, equity, and inclusive efforts that are going to take place. One thing I will tell you, I do know that Kansas City has a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer for the city,
Yes.
but for me, that's not good enough. If I'm the leader of this agency, I want a diversity, equity, and inclusive person as a member of my executive staff. Because in order for us to be able to make changes, you have to have somebody who is solely focused on that organization as a whole to say, listen, these practices are wrong, we have to get rid of them. I think that's how you start to move forward. And I cannot stress to you enough, it's not a bad agency. It's just an agency that is at a precipice. That's the way that I like to look at it. We're at a precipice. In policing and as an agency, we have to make changes. Some changes are hard. Some changes we're not going to like, but you have to make them. So those are the things that if you want to make changes within an agency, because if it's perceived, to me that means it's real. We have to have diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts involved within that agency. That's also how you get to win back your community. Because if they see that you're making those necessary changes and you call it out, you broadcast it, you let them know what we're doing here, and these are the changes that we're making, then you'll start to gain trust. Until you do that, we're going to go round and round on the merry-go-round because these changes are not being made.
Thank you for that. Next question. What do you feel are the top 3 priorities that need to be addressed in Kansas City if you become the next chief of police?
So, just like other cities, gun violence, number 1. That's important. Also, community engagement, and also just a restoration of public trust. Those things are very important. I mean, there are a number of things that could be mentioned, but everybody is concerned about gun violence because there are too many guns on the street. And it's not just Kansas City, it's in Philadelphia, it's in Baltimore, it's everywhere. There are too many guns on the street, and there are too many guns in the hands of our young people. And that's something that we have to work on. And I think those things are very important. So when our officers are out making great arrests, which they do, when they're out there making great arrests and they're getting guns off the street and they're doing things the right way, we have to make sure that from a prosecution standpoint that arrest sticks. Now, don't get me wrong. Arrests will never solve your problem, because a lot of the issues go far beyond that. But I think ensuring that we're tackling gun violence, utilizing intelligence-led policing in doing so, ensuring that we're having community engagement with the people that we're servicing. If we don't have that, you're not going to be successful, as I stated earlier, ensuring that we're having those meetings that they know that they have a chief that they can actually see. I think that's very important. And just restoring public trust, because like I said, this is not a bad agency. It's just an agency at a precipice.
Excellent. So if appointed chief, what will you do to improve police and community relations?
So one of the things that is very important, or the way that I was taught as a commander is, and I keep repeating myself, but it's true. I'm not lying to you. You cannot be successful without talking to the people that you service.
Sure.
I think that for me, one of the reasons, I can tell you why I got into policing. I got into policing because I wanted people to understand that it can be done the right way, because I saw what policing was like when it was done by officers who did not do it the right way. I've had police guns in my face. Sure. So those things tend to affect you as you come up. So when you understand that those are changes that can be made, I got into policing at the age of 19, and I've been doing it ever since. But the reason why I've been pretty much successful in it is because I haven't been afraid to have a relationship with the community, letting them know what's going on in your neighborhood. Who's committing the crime? You don't have to broadcast it, but what are we doing? But it's also not just with the adults in the community, and this is what we tend to forget about. It's young people. You know, one of the questions that I asked one of the young people in the neighborhood that I was servicing, it was 3 young guys, and I asked them, I said, if I could give you a job and it's $80,000 a year you're getting paid, you'll never be rich, but you can take care of your mom, you can take care of your family, you can have a nice life. Would you do it? And the young people were like, oh, yeah, we would do it. I said, well, what do you think we're doing in policing? And they said, no, we can't do it. Yeah. That's a problem. Because they already have it ingrained in their head that we are not doing it the right way. And that's the perception that we need to change. So understanding that accountability is big for me, understanding that community engagement is big for me, doing things that are not just for a holiday. You know, within Philadelphia, one of the things that districts are responsible for is it's an active question every month. What are you doing for your community? And I'm not saying that Philadelphia is the best and we're the greatest, but I'm saying some of the things are standard that I know that I would be bringing here. It's not, what are you just doing on Thanksgiving? What are you doing on Christmas for your community? What are you doing this month? As the commander, what are you doing? Do they know who you are? Is it just a 9-to-5 job for you? That determines what type of leader you're going to have. So those are the changes that are important to me.
Excellent. So as a candidate for chief, what do you believe is the driving force of homicides in Kansas City? And what strategies do you have to help reduce the homicide rate?
So for me, it's 2 things. One of the things is a lack of value. If you have a mindset that you do not value life, you're going to do whatever you can do in the time that you have. And it's a problem with our young people, and it's not just exclusive here. I know the question pertains to Kansas City itself, but the same issues that are going on in Kansas City with gun violence is the same thing going on in Philadelphia. Young people do not think that they are going to live long. And when you don't think that you're going to live long, you're going to do whatever you can do while I'm here. And if that is pillage and plunder for the time being to get what I want, then that's what they're going to do. We have to change that mindset, but it takes more than the police to be able to do that. And also, we have to increase more opportunities for our young people. One of the things that's important is that I look out into this crowd and I see all adults for the most part. I can't really see too far because the lights are bright, but it's all adults. Where are the young people? Why is that? That's a problem. So one of the things that we will have to do as an agency is just like we have a board of commissioners for the department. Can we start a youth advisory council for the department where each section of the city has a bunch of young people whose voices are going to be heard, who may speak for the young people in that specific area. So those things are important. And so when you talk about lack of opportunity, lack of value, we have to fix that narrative. But I can promise you, it will not be the police department who solves the problem. And this is where the community engagement aspect comes into place. The people of Kansas City need to know that whether it's me, whether it's a commander that is servicing them, whether it's the good men and women of the Kansas City Police Department, that they are going to have their needs met. And there are good officers here. They are doing great work. We have to believe in them. If we continue to hear just negative aspects of our police department, it starts to seep in your psyche. The officers that are servicing you start to believe that you don't care. And it's something that we have to fix within the agency and also within the community as a whole in order to ensure that Kansas City is where we want it to be in terms of one of the best cities in the country.
Thank you. So do you believe that police and youth engagement is important? You talked about that a little bit. What plans do you have to build a stronger relationship between the police and youth?
Well, I guess I got a little ahead of your
Yes.
question, but just ensuring that the young people have a voice. Far too often, you know, if young people feel as though they're not heard, they're gonna do whatever they want to do. You know, and I think that we have to have an agency that understands that, and that, not to say that the men and women are not doing anything, but I think there has to be a concerted effort into ensuring that they're heard, because I know that you have school resource officers that are doing great things. I know that you have PAL and different community programs that are doing great things, but there has to be a focused effort in ensuring that their voices are heard and that they're going to communicate that message back to their peers, because they're the voice. You know, whether we like it or not, they're the ones that really dictate the success of the city. You know, so I think that if you have that concerted effort focusing on young people, letting them know that, you know what, we're here for you. It's not all bad. We can be successful. We hear you. What are some of the things that you would like changed within, you know, the agency, the city itself as a whole? We need to be able to let them know that they have a voice, they can speak up about it, but we also have to actually do it. So.
Thank you. Now, Inspector, this is your last question, and after that, we will go into the community questions, just as a reminder. So at what point in your law enforcement career did you decide you wanted to be a police chief? And what goals did you plan to achieve as chief?
So I guess I answered that a little earlier. It was 19, and I wanted it to be different. I wanted it to be something that people in my community knew. Well, I know Sean, and I know he's going to do it the right way. And for my 26-year career, it's been pretty much done the right way. I've gained a lot of community trust. I've tried to be the best officer that I can be, servicing the people of Philadelphia. But most importantly for me, it's always been about fairness and understanding that I always like to remember everybody has a bad day. Just because you're arresting somebody or you're encountering somebody at that particular moment does not mean that they're bad people. And I feel as though I've done it the right way, to the point where my 23-year-old son is now a police officer.
Very good.
And for me, I try to impart on him, I say, son, it's like Wile E. Coyote and the sheepdog. He says, what do you mean, Dad? I said, do you remember the cartoon when Wile E. Coyote and the sheepdog clocked in at the same time? That's the cop and the criminal. At 5 o'clock, Wile E. Coyote and the sheepdog punched back out at 5 o'clock. It's never personal. The criminal's job is to commit crime. The men and women of the police department's job is to make arrests and do the things that we need to do, but do it in the right way. We have to understand it's never personal. And I think if we, as a policing community, understand that, then we can get the outcomes that we need to see. And don't get me wrong, I know it's not all pie in the sky,
Sure.
but I think if we have that mentality, we can get to where we need to be. Because in policing, you have to remember, you are dealing with mostly alpha personalities.
Yes.
And people don't understand that.
Right.
If it were all betas, it'd be all good. But it's mostly alpha personalities where people don't like to be told what to do. No one likes to be told what to do.
Right.
And especially when you're having that bad situation, you don't like to be told what to do.
Right.
But as long as we do it with a level of respect, dignity, and professionalism that I will demand as a leader, then we can do it the right way. Are we going to make mistakes? Yes, we are. Is it going to be good all the time? No, it's not. But that's where, as the leader, I say, listen, we made a mistake. We didn't do it the right way, but I can promise you we will correct it. Those are the things where the accountability level comes into play. That's what I believe in. I do not believe in lying to the community. It's not what I'm about, because the God I serve, I gotta lay down with that.
Yeah.
And I told the community, the board of commissioners, the very same thing. I told them, if you want somebody that is going to lie to the community, don't hire me. I don't have a problem with that. Right. I think if we talk about gaining community trust, You got to be honest. Policing is not going to be pretty all the time. It's not going to be the way that you want it all the time. Sometimes officers are going to have to make the hard decisions in less than 2 seconds. It's the truth. It's not always going to be right. But does that mean that that officer came out with the intention that day to take a life? No officer does that. I can tell you that. No officer comes to work to say, I want to take a life today. But they have to live with the decisions that they make, whether they're right or whether they're wrong. And what they have to have is a leader that stands by them. And when they're right, I will tell them they're right. When they're wrong, we will work through it, but you will know you're wrong.
Thank you. All right, sir, that was the last of the questions here, and now we will open it up to the community.
I'm going to ask Bishop Morrison if he will choose a name. He'll call your name, and you can come up. You have 60 seconds to ask a question.
The next question will come from Griffin Peoples.
Hello there. Good afternoon to you and everyone here.
Good afternoon, sir.
I propose a question and a thesis. Trust leading to truth, leading to facts. The facts is that in regards to the violence in the community of Kansas City, I agree with the term lack of conflict resolution. Building bridges, improving the internal atmosphere, whole community involvement, better collaboration, community policing, relations, involvement, and engagement. And lastly, the perception, right or wrong. What do you feel that you could do as the theory that you would be the chief of police of Kansas City, Missouri, to have control to, I feel, the stem of the root of the violence? It's too many guns.
So as I stated earlier, you're absolutely right. It's too many guns. There has to be a hand-in-hand. So you all are doing the same thing that we're doing in Philadelphia when it comes to focused deterrence. We're doing the same thing because this method is going on across the country. You have to have a focused and concerted effort to getting rid of your most violent offenders. So I'll give you an example. Where I was at as a divisional inspector prior to my assignment now, we had the year before, we had 125 homicides in my division, a small area. So the year I got there had to be a concerted effort of how are we going to change that. We also have a very lenient district attorney where we lock them up with guns and they come right out. It's a revolving door. So one of the things that we had to do is, as a leader, you have to be willing to work with outside agencies to be able to focus on who is committing the most violent acts within your community. But also, they have to be held accountable with that. So you have to be laser focused on how we're going to address the gun issue. We created a task force where we actually work with our Attorney General of the state. So we got additional help because it needed to be more than just the men and women of the police department, where we now took these arrests out of the hands of our city district attorney and turned it into, now you're going to do some serious federal time for these same offenses that would have been more lenient. So I think when you create a more focused effort on those specific offenders and broadcasting that information, because honestly, criminals don't respect state time. They don't respect it. What they do fear is Fed time. So you have to get those parties involved, which I know that Kansas City is doing. But there has to be that focused effort in order to reduce those types of offenses.
I wanted to say lastly, I believe that the person you would be working with, who is the Jackson County prosecutor, is an individual named Gene Peters Bakers. Quite frankly, I'm going to say the term man of the people, she's a lady of the people. Like recently, the individual, Reed, who caused an accident, who caused a little girl to have permanent injuries for the rest of her life. She is someone who does stand up more for the community, for the people. So I do wish that that would be the case of what you're saying. That a new procedure, a time for change, and you would help initiate that change in procedure and policy and policing, and that things would be better. It would be better.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Our next question is coming from Vince Magers.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you, sir.
And thanks for your interest in serving our city.
Thank you.
My question is, what would you do specifically to improve public transparency for KCPD?
So, as I stated before, if I'm not willing to call it out, I can't be transparent. You know, I can't consider myself transparent if, when we're committing mistakes, we're not acknowledging those errors. And there has to be policies and practices in place in reference to that. Obviously, I would have to conduct a extensive review of what the policies and practices are within the agency. Sometimes the practices are put in place not even understanding the outcome of hiding transparency. And what I mean by that is sometimes agencies have policies that have been in place maybe for 5 years, where the issues of 5 years ago are not necessarily considering the issues of today. So you have to look into the transparency aspect of the policies as well. But when your errors are egregious, you got to call them out. And I just told you, if I'm not willing to tell the people of Kansas City who I'm serving, we made a mistake, am I worth being up here? And that's honest. But there's also changes that are going to have to be made. And when officers make a mistake of the head or a mistake of the heart, we need to be able to differentiate between the two. Was the actions of this officer something that had to do with training? Or was this action of the officer something that had to do with an ill intent? And sometimes, you know, you really have to you weigh that out when it comes to making decisions and things of that nature. But you also have to let the public know when we've made a mistake. Now, some city attorneys may not like that, but it's the truth when it comes to being transparent, and I believe in that. So I hope that answers your question.
Our next question comes from, please forgive me if I mispronounce your name, Nigella Sullivan. Oh, okay. Did I say it right? I didn't. Because you didn't spell it right.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So my question is, what plans do you have to address school shootings?
Okay. Good question. That's what I'm talking about. Somebody who's thinking real about the young people. So when it comes to school shootings, it is happening too often, honestly. One of the things that we have to put in place, every student should be made to feel as though they're safe in their environment. We really should. And if I am correct, you all are looking for a new leader, a chief of your school?
District superintendent, yes.
Okay. So one of the things that I would do is I would have to have a hard conversation with that superintendent so that we can put things in place to make sure that our young people feel safe. We need to make sure that we have, and I know you all have a tip line and texting and all of those good things, but you all need to understand as young people that we are available for you, that you should not feel afraid with that. We need to ensure that our resource officers are actively engaging our young people, not in the negative aspect. I know a lot of them are doing great work, but I want them to do even better. making sure that they're communicating with you all. Hey, how you doing? How you feeling today? Is everything all good? If not, I need to know about it. What are you seeing? What are you not seeing? These things are important. There also needs to be visibility, and that's something that would have to be reevaluated as well. Is there anything that we're not doing as an agency to ensure your safety other than the school resource officer? Is there anything we can do more of? Is there anything in terms of maybe even spot inspections that an additional officer can show up and just walk through the school just to say, hey, you know what? This school is in my location of work. You know, this is in my zone. I'm just going to stop in and say hey to the principal. These are things that maybe we need to do better. Not to say that they're doing a bad job, but we have to ensure that you feel safe in what you do. But we need to make sure that we engage with you as well. I think far too often we as police departments across the country, we wait too late to engage the young people in their educational years. By the time they get to high school and middle school, they kind of already have their mind set on where they are in terms of how they feel with policing. They either like you or they don't. I think we need to make sure that there is certain follow-through that we as a department have with you all to make sure that you all feel safe. So my job is to make sure that that happens and make sure that you have what you need. So does that answer your question? If not, let me know.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Good morning. My name is DeShawn Beaufort. I am from the Philadelphia Police Department. At the time of application, I was an inspector commanding the second largest patrol division in the city of Philadelphia. Since then, I've currently been promoted to the rank of chief inspector. I command now our Office of Professional Responsibility, which encompasses our Internal Affairs Bureau, our Standards and Accountability Bureau, our Recruit Background and Training, and also our Court Attendance and Liaison. So it is an absolute pleasure to be here and speak with you all and meet you all. Being from Philadelphia, being an inspector in the past, I have a lot of similarities with some of the incidents that you have going on here in Miami in terms of size of the force that I was commanding as an inspector. I had 753 officers that were working for me at the time. I was in Northwest Police Division. At that time, I serviced an area of about 330,000 citizens. Your population is about 490,000. It was very, very multicultural within Northwest Police Division, so I had that opportunity to experience that as well, so it's an absolute pleasure to be here. With that being said, I'll open the floor for your questions.
First question.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Are you familiar with the Police Executive Research Forum's guiding principles on the use of force? And if you are, what is your opinion regarding the implementation of these policies?
So in reference to the Police Executive Research Forum's use of force, number one, they are an absolute dynamic organization in providing guidance to police agencies. When we talk about use of force, I believe that every department has to have an understanding of what their use of force system is that they have in place. They are to constantly be reviewed and monitored and changed, especially with the events that we have going on today. In terms of use of force, you really have to take a hard look at the standards and practices that you have in place, ensuring that your officers are being held accountable by their leadership. So when we talk about what the Police Executive Research Forum has put in place, that doctrine should be monitored constantly and implicated in every police agency. I know within my very own agency, that's something that we're actually reviewing again to make sure that we're in compliance with both what our state mandates, also some of the recommendations that the Police Executive Research Forum has put into place. And then you have other standards that have been put in place by just the matters that are going on today, such as the 8 Can't Wait campaign and things of that nature when you talk about ensuring that you're in order with the use of force, that we ban chokeholds, that we have officers stepping in when other officers are in violation of certain policies. So I think it's very important that we constantly monitor that and constantly include that in updating policies and practices that we have today. Now, within Miami, that would be something that I would do just coming in right away, making sure that we're in compliance with that we're utilizing best practices as we move forward, because I think that's very important. I think we want to be in tune, and not just be in tune, but you also want to be a leader as an agency. I like what Miami has in terms of some of the things that they've put in place, just by way of certain things that they're doing in terms of interacting with the community. I think that's very important. What I saw in my research was very impressive. So I definitely believe that Miami's headed in the proper direction in reference to that. But constant monitoring of use of force is very key.
Next question. Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
This question has a few parts.
Okay.
Please tell us if you have an opinion, and if so, what that opinion is, regarding the need for collection of data to identify and document racial and ethnic disparities for use as a tool to figuring out how to ensure racial, ethnic fairness in policing. Do you have experience in collecting and analyzing data of this type? And would you commit to implementing protocols to collect and analyze racial and ethnic data in connection with all police encounters with the public?
So when we talk about gathering data, specifically on different races, we really have to be careful about the way that we do things. First and foremost, so I'll tell you right now, being the commander of the Office of Professional Responsibility, one of the things that I'm accountable for is making sure that audits are done of our written systems of documenting how we stop people. So within Philadelphia, we have something called the Bailey Agreement. So what the Bailey Agreement is it's something that mandates when we stop somebody, it has to be in compliance of what the law is. It has to be in compliance with our systems and our documentations. So when we talk about monitoring and stopping various groups of people, you really have to be careful with that, because you do not want to be in violation of a person's civil rights, because persons have a reasonable reason to be out, to walk about, to do those types of things. So you have to be careful with that. Now, in terms of implementation, I believe that a department should work in unison with other city agencies for the need of certain things. So case in point, when we have persons that are in a specific area that may be high in drug usage, what are the services that we are providing to those persons? Can we keep contact with these people so that the other city agencies can get what they need to be able to help these persons? But just for the sense of stopping and documenting, well, we're stopping this amount of Hispanics, or we're stopping this amount of blacks, or we're stopping this amount of whites, you really can run into problems with that. Because if you look at what that city's makeup may be, you may have a certain group of people that have been stopped more than another, just because of the city's makeup. So in my opinion, the documentation of that really has to be specific and has to be need-based. You really have to be careful with that, because I'm an objection, which is violating people's civil rights just for the purpose of saying, hey, we stopped this amount of people, or we stopped this group of people. What are we doing with that? So we just can't forget about how we're implementing these practices. Why did we stop these people? Did we stop these people because of such and such? And what are the services that we're going to provide those people? So we really have to be careful about that. So it's not something that I'm strongly against, but it's not something that I'm necessarily strongly for. It really has to be a purpose for it, for us to be able to do this.
Next question.
Well, I'm going to modify my question a bit, because obviously you're from out of town, so you wouldn't it wouldn't be fair if I ask you how long you lived in the city of Miami, because obviously you don't. However, where, switch the question a little bit, where would you like to take the city of Miami Police Department into the future? What would be your objective or your goals?
So for me, as I stated before, just doing research on the agency, there was a lot of things that I saw that really stood out to me. And one of the things that I feel as though is very important is community engagement. And from what I have seen so far, just in my research, I'm very impressed. But what I feel as though is very important is that Miami become a leader in that, in making sure that the community is aware of what's going on, and making sure that the department is moving forward with its vision, the strategic vision of its leader. Now, understanding that, I feel as though it should be broadcast at a louder level, because you want to be a leader. When you look at other cities and what they have in place, certain cities are known for certain things. But I see Miami as a city that's on the precipice of being a leader in relating to its community. What I've seen online, what I've seen from Chief Kalina in the past, it's really impressive to see. Even speaking with some of the other executives in this agency, it's really nice to see how this agency is determined to have that positive interaction with the community, getting information out to the community. Those things are important. Those are things that I want to broadcast. Those are things that I want people to understand. Well, this is why Miami is such a great agency. Just even on the terms of with the pandemic, how you had very little officers that called out of work. That shows dedication on the count of the officers. Those are things that tells me as a leader that this agency actually understands, they care about their community, they want to come to work. This is what sets this department apart from other agencies that do not do those things. So I think just moving the department forward in terms of crime and things of that nature, obviously that's always going to be a number one priority, but being as though this is a city that is very diverse and is just such a melting pot of great cultural races, I think that can be broadcast and that can be put out, and that messaging is very, very important. Even the agency itself being multicultural, that is awesome. So these are the things that can be broadcast out to the nation. This is why this agency works so well, because we support one another, we support our community, and we're determined to make a difference.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Next question. Chief Harms, it's your question.
One of the things I've noticed in the recent past, is there are many uniformed officers that are overweight, out of shape, and they do not look professional. What has your department done in that regard? And certainly, I have focused on the city of Miami because of my background. What would you do with the city of Miami to make sure that the officers look good, look professional, and act professionally? And how would you implement such a program?
So for me, if you look at, one of the pillars of 21st century, the President's Commission on 21st Century Policing talks about that very thing, talks about officer fitness and well-being. So more than ever today, with us dealing with the pandemic, I think it's no better time to stress to our officers about being in shape and having a mental, and ensuring their mental well-being. So I'll give you an example. Within Philadelphia, we've had numerous officers as of recently that have lost their lives because of the pandemic. Part of that is because of the shape that those officers were in. So for me, I think now is the time that the department get that messaging out there so that we can get officers that are very much in shape, very much mentally and physically well. And it goes beyond just the physicality of it. We have to check on our officers mentally. This pandemic is wearing on a nation. And I think it's something that we don't discuss necessarily as a department enough. I know within my agency it's something we're trying to do more of. But having officers that are in shape is very important. I think when the public sees police, they need to see the very best because we represent the best of city government. So instituting programs such as, working out, various different methods of that is very important. As the police commissioner myself, I would want to do that. I would want officers to see me in shape. I believe in practicing what I preach. I don't think being a leader out of shape would work well for me trying to get my officers in shape. So just working with the officers, coming up with some programs, some incentives via maybe the law enforcement health benefits program that you may have in place, making sure that we have incentives for, possibly health checks and things of that nature at certain times of the year for our officers. I know it's something we do in Pennsylvania. We have our officers go to certain places that are associated with our health benefits. And, we may get them shots. We may give them certain prizes. We have battle of the badges, things of that nature, where we kind of use those things to have officers battle against other law enforcement professionals, just to kind of create that camaraderie and a little bit of competition to make sure that we get them in great physical shape. Now, within this year, it's been a little tough because of the pandemic, but definitely making sure that we hold our officers accountable in their appearance is very important.
Good morning, sir. Welcome.
Good morning, sir. Thank you very much.
You kind of touched on what your vision of the future for the City of Miami Police Department is in your mind, but overall, what is your vision for the future of policing throughout the United States?
So that's a very good question. Probably a year ago, it probably would have been something different. But being as though we are in the state that we are in today, specifically with what has gone on across the country with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and even in Philadelphia, we had Walter Wallace. I think policing is at a precipice, and I really do. I believe that it has to change, and we have to be held more accountable in terms of holding ourselves accountable as an agency. You cannot arrest your way out of a problem. And for far too long, I believe that agencies across the country, because this is what policing was, it was arresting our way out, well, trying to arrest our way out of a problem. And what have we built from that? We've built non-trust with the community. We've built a very high prison population. We've built a drug-addicted population because we are trying to solve a problem by trying to arrest our way out of it. It doesn't work. So what we need to do in terms of policing is get the people who need help, the help that they need. So here's one example we have. So in Philadelphia, we have obviously very, very high crime. It's a city of 1.5 million people, and is also the largest, #1, poorest big city, very impoverished. So what comes along with that? You have high crime, high drug use, high unemployment. So one of the things that we have high recidivism, where we have the same criminals. We have about 9 to 10% of the population creating 90% of the crime. It's ridiculous. So what we did was we instituted something what was called group violence intervention. And we focused on various different levels of criminals. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be high violence criminals that are just included in that group. They range. But these were criminals that were doing a lot of the same crimes. So what we did was we tried to get those persons the specific help that we could get them from the city. So we would identify certain prolific offenders, ones that we know may be part of a group or part of a ring of crime or whatever it may be, and we would actually go out to their homes. We would knock on the doors you may have the police commander of that district, the police inspector, which is the divisional commander. We would have the DA's office personnel there. We would have social services. We actually had employment services there as well to try to meet the needs of these people. And, in the beginning, some persons were a little bit against it because this is traditionally not what policing is. It's kind of unheard of. Who does that? But it's something that if we are to make a difference in the future, because what we've done in the past is not building success for the future, we have to try something different. And it is only those cities that are going to be willing to make that change that will be successful. You look at other cities and they're demanding change. You know, with the recent riots and things like that that's going on, you hear that's an outcry from the people. And you can either be tone deaf and continue along that path, or you can recognize that, you know what, policing has to change, and we're going to have to get ahead of it. So this is where the great leaders are going to say, you know what, let's do some things differently. Let's try this. This city is doing this. How can we implement it into our system? We can make it our own, but how can we make that change here? So those are the things that are going to make a successful agency. Those are the things that smart police departments are going to do in the future. And those are the things that are going to be successful.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next question.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
As a business owner in the city, I see a growing issue with the impact the homeless have on our business community. Additionally, incidents involving people with mental illness and the police are a source of concern. How would you ensure that your department is prepared to deal with these situations? Also, what resources or training would you implement to assist officers with dealing with citizens who are homeless or have special needs or mental illness?
So I'll tell you, so I mentioned it previously, just briefly ago when we had an incident in Philadelphia. I don't know if you're familiar. It was Walter Wallace. So for those of you who are not familiar, Walter Wallace had been, 911 had been called, and Walter Wallace had mental issues. Walter Wallace came out of the house with a knife, and the officers, you know, they actually ran around the police car before they had to fatally shoot Walter Wallace. And one of the outcries in the city was, where was the mental health advocates? Why did the police do this, or why did the police do that? They didn't have a taser. So you see that there is a need in policing for training. Now, don't get me wrong, we do have crisis intervention training for our officers within the agency, and I'm certain that's definitely something that Miami PD has here, because most, obviously, large cities and even smaller agencies have some type of crisis intervention training for their officers. But this was just a sad situation where we couldn't get the city agency out there in time. At that time, there was no crisis intervention trained officers, because we're talking about 6,600 officers in my agency alone. So to get them all trained is very cumbersome. So there's definitely an issue for that. And as a business owner, as I stated before, Philadelphia is the #1 poorest big city. So homelessness is huge. And it is something that our business owners are very familiar with. But what we see is that there's a need for other services, because in all honesty, policing should not be bogged down with the homelessness problem. It is about getting those persons the help that they need. So this is where policing and other social services are going to have to come into play. But it is also about treating people with respect who have mental issues, because everyone is not a bad person, and everyone shouldn't be seen as such. Everyone has some type of demons that they're fighting. I don't care how good the person is. Everybody has a demon. So it's something that we have to understand as a department, as an agency, and as a city. We need to come together and figure out what can we do to help those persons. And you do have a lot of business owners that try to employ those persons, or try to reach out, try to direct those persons to good agencies. Some business owners have even gotten together to try to create different things to try to help the population as well. But I do understand that's not necessarily their problem. But as a human being, how can we help? And it's our responsibility to make sure that, you know, you're supposed to love your brother, love your sister. And it may not be what a business owner wants to do. I get that, and I absolutely understand that. But there's always a means of giving back. And I think that is where the city has to come together, not just the department alone as an agency, because this is how we get into that cycle of, oh, well, let the police handle it. Yeah, but what is social services doing? You know, are we getting them treatment? I mean, in Philadelphia, we have a very high heroin epidemic. Philadelphia is the number one city in America for the purest heroin. So you can imagine what kind of things that we're dealing with in the city in terms of homelessness. We're getting people that come in from other states that never leave. And the area is called Kensington. You can Google it. It's bad. And these are things that we've realized we can't arrest our way out of this problem. What are the services that we can provide them? And that's what we're focusing on now. So as a business owner, for me as the chief of the agency, it would be talking to the other city agencies to hold them accountable, because everybody is holding the police accountable. But there are other agencies that have to be involved to solve the problem, not just the police, because eventually, what is the hardest hammer that we have? Arresting the person. They'll be back out. So, and remember I said, we can't arrest our way out of a problem. They need help. And I think it's upon us to be able to try to move them in that direction.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Next
sir.
question, Chief Dixon, and that's your question.
You're on mute, Chief. Chief, you're muted.
You're on mute, Chief.
You're muted. Hold on. Whoa.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Chief, based on what you know now about the challenges facing law enforcement today, what are the 3 top priorities you would address as chief?
Okay, sir. So obviously, coming into the position, one of the things that are very important, number one is always going to be crime. You know, even though Miami is not necessarily as prolific in major violence as, let's say, Philadelphia, but crime is always going to be number one because every citizen has to be ensured a sense of safety. Also, being in that we're in this environment today, your budgetary constraints have to be something that has to be monitored by your new chief, because with the pandemic, it has definitely had an effect on the budgets of policing. And thirdly, for me, it's about the vision of the agency and the well-being of the agency. For me, it is about talking to the community, talking to the officers, understanding what their feelings are, how they feel about their agency. So the 3 things for me definitely has to do with crime, the vision of the agency, you know, and definitely the budget. How we move forward, how we are successful as an agency to be able to be fruitful, because at the end of the day, we are providing a service. So to me, policing is definitely a business. You know, money is invested and a service is provided. Are the services that we provide on the level where they need to be servicing our population? So those things are very important for me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, that's the end. That's the end of the question part. Now, Mr. Beaufort, you have 5 minutes to do your wrap up. You may begin.
Oh, thank you very much. Basically, I just wanted to say thank you for bringing me out to this. It speaks very loudly how passionate you are about considering the strongest candidates for your city. I absolutely thank you for that. For me, it's an absolute blessing to be here. And just the hospitality of the city has been very, very great. I thank you for that. Ultimately, it's about where you want to go as a city. I'll tell you right now, from the persons that I've met, anybody would be, out of this group that you have here, you have some great people here. So whether it's me or whether it's somebody else, you'll definitely have a great person to lead this agency. I believe this agency is moving in the right direction. I believe that I, as a leader, would be able to, to help to move this agency forward. It would be an honor. But I definitely just wanted to say thank you for that. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you.
Thank you.